should have seen the view from halfway down. No, I really should have thought about the view from halfway down.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
Don't stop dancing.
Okay, wow. The second part of Season 6 just aired, and thus concluded the Bojack Horseman series. And yeah, it was quite the finale. There were parts of this I absolutely loved, and parts of it I didn't. Anyone familiar with Bojack Horseman will know that the show isn't afraid to tackle dark and taboo issues, and this finale certainly was no different, especially with the second to last episode, which I would argue has the darkest scene we've seen in all of Bojack Horseman, and perhaps any animated show for that matter. But we'll get into that in a bit. First, I just want to touch upon Bojack ending in general. Apparently this was an unexpected decision on Netflix's side for both the show creators and the audience, which obviously left people with split feelings about the show actually coming to an end. Me, personally, I think it was good that the show ended where it did, and here's my reasoning. See, what separates Bojack Horseman from other typical animated shows is that character actions in one episode will carry over consequences into future episodes and even future seasons. And this actually means that characters are forced to grow and develop as the show goes on. It's not like in Family Guy or The Simpsons where Homer and Peter seem to learn a new life lesson in each episode, yet somehow become stupider as the show progresses onwards. Bojack would actually force the characters to address their flaws and try to become better people.
I know that I can be selfish and narcissistic and self-destructive, but underneath all that, deep down, I'm a good person and I need you to tell me that I'm good.
And this is why I think it was good that the show ended where it did. See, the typical pattern for Bojack himself would be that he would do stupid stuff, realise he's an arsehole, and by the end of the season will try to better himself. Only for it to go all horribly wrong again at the start of the next season, but on a much worse scale. It was almost like he would take one step forward and two steps back. And by the end of season 5, he had kind of gone back as far as he could go. As at the start of season 5, we see that he has cut down on the alcohol, but as a consequence of that, he instead gets addicted to drugs, and starts developing paranoia and hallucinations, and ends up nearly strangling his girlfriend at the time to death in front of a film crew. And it was at this point that Bojack finally admitted, hey, you know, I can't keep doing this shit. I think it's time I get some professional help to finally fix myself. And so he checks himself into rehab. Which brings us to season 6 part 1. Bojack manages to get clean in rehab, and though initially not wanting to leave in fear that he'll revert back to his old ways, he eventually does and moves to the college campus that his half-sister Hollyhock is studying at, where he signs up to be a professor to teach acting. All seems good and happy until Hollyhock bumps into a guy at a party called Pete, who we know as Pete Repeat from season 2.
I always say everything twice.
Everything.
Yeah, it's kind of my thing.
Where Bojack took a bunch of kids to prom and ended up getting Pete's girlfriend alcohol poisoning. Pete is telling this story to Hollyhock, and when Hollyhock asks who the mysterious adult was that made this all happen, the scene cuts, and that's the end of season 6 part 1. Season 6 part 2 kicks off with episode 9.
No, I don't think I will.
Where we see Bojack preparing for his first class.
And that's a Sharpie.
And though this opening scene is funny, I can't help but feel it's a foreshadow for how Bojack can't erase his past mistakes. For the most part, the episode is light-hearted as we see Bojack attempting to teach the students acting, even though they don't seem very good at it. But things start to seem off when Hollyhock begins to act hostile towards Bojack, indicating that Pete did indeed tell her that the mysterious adult in the story was Bojack. The episode ends with Bojack receiving a phone call from Charlotte being Bojack's old friend and the mother of the teenage girl Bojack nearly had sex with, and episode 10 begins. Episode 10 steps back in time a bit as we now focus on Diane as she struggles to write her book whilst on her antidepressants. I really like the animation style used to illustrate Diane's internal thoughts, and it reminds me a lot of the sketchy style used in a previous episode to illustrate Bojack's inner thoughts from season 4.
You're a piece of garbage.
The episode does a great job of representing the mental struggle going on in Diane's head, as she feels that without her depression, she can't use it as the creative force to write her tragic journal. Meanwhile, the two detectives from the first part of the season are closing in on their investigation to Bojack's connection with Sarah Lynn's death. The episode ends with Bojack once again receiving the call from Charlotte, only this time we see it causes him to have a panic attack. Also, this episode has a really great animal pun in it. It's not relevant to the plot, but I just really liked it. Episode 11 has Bojack confess to his friends what really happened with Sarah Lynn. Originally, Bojack had told the story that he found Sarah Lynn passed out in the planetarium, when in reality, Bojack was actually there with her, and was the one who supplied her with the drugs in the first place. The B-plot of this episode focuses on Mr. Peanut Butter and Pickles trying to mend their relationship by getting Pickles to have sex with Joey in order to get even with Mr. Peanut Butter's affair with Diane, but ends with Pickles deciding to run off with Joey instead. I've gotta be honest, I've not really been on board with the whole Pickles and Mr. Peanut Butter thing, mostly because I find the character Pickles to be annoying.
Hey Pickle Pack, getting ready for another job interview.
Pickle Pack? More like pickle pack your things and fuck off. The two plots meet as Mr. Peanut Butter spills the beans on Bojack being with Sarah Lynn the night she died, as Bojack once told him this whilst hammered. The reporters telephone Bojack and question him on these allegations. Princess Carolyn tells Bojack to deny them, and Diane tells Bojack to face the truth. Bojack ends up denying them, and the episode ends. Episode 12 kicks off with Bojack agreeing to do a TV interview in order to clear his name. Fortunately, the interview has been carried out by the same person who helped Bojack clear the allegations of strangling his girlfriend in season 5. The interview paints Bojack as the victim, and manages to win him over on the public support. Unfortunately though, Bojack's fame-hungry ways begin to kick in again, as he wants to immediately do another TV interview to milk the recent fame. This time, however, things go very differently, and Bojack is forced to confess the truth about what happened to him and Sarah Lynn. Cue episode 13, where everyone now hates Bojack, including Hollyhock, who isn't returning Bojack's calls, and has only left him a letter to which Bojack is too scared to read. Bojack gets sued by Sarah Lynn's parents and a brand company, causing him to lose all of his money and even his house. At the end of the episode, Bojack finally decides to read Hollyhock's letter. We never get to see what she actually wrote, but from the look of Bojack's reaction, the indication is that she has decided to cut all ties with him. Episode 14. Bojack has reached rock bottom and is once again back on the booze. He actually meets up with the old producer from Horsing Around who got him to help fire Herb back in the day. After a bit of conflict between the two, Bojack ends up selling his rights to the show so the company can re-release Horsing Around with Bojack edited out. Todd, meanwhile, finally gets to see his mum again after all this time in what is a pretty anticlimactic reunion. And I say this because with the amount of great lengths she was going to in order to avoid him, I was actually beginning to think there was going to be some huge twist, like she was actually dead the whole time. And the reason Todd's stepdad kept that away from him was because Todd's determination to constantly try to impress his mum is what was driving him to become a better person. But no, she's actually pretty normal, and the whole two of them meeting is just pretty meh. Oh, and Princess Carolyn and Judah are now in love. I guess that was a thing. What? The episode ends with a hammered Bojack breaking into his former home to sit down and watch old episodes of Horsing Around, reminiscent of what he used to do way back in season 1. Then we have episode 15, which is without a doubt the strongest episode of the season, and perhaps one of the strongest episodes of the entire series. The episode starts with Bojack attending a dinner party, where he's the guest of honor. The twist is that the people attending this dinner party are all people that have died throughout the show. Herb, Bojack's old friend who died of cancer, his mother, Crackerjack, Bojack's uncle that we met in the old Sugarman place, Sarah Lynn, Secretariat, who also doubles up as Bojack's father, which I'm guessing is meant to represent as to how a young Bojack may have ended up looking up to him as a father figure. And finally, the guy who accidentally hung himself from autoerotic asphyxiation. Yeah, he's just kinda here too, I guess. Now, every season of Bojack would always have that one episode that goes particularly dark. And this is that episode for season 6. And holy shit does it get dark. The episode starts off relatively light-hearted, with everyone talking about the best and worst moments of their lives. But things soon start to get eerily dark. Once dinner is over, the other characters state they are now going off to watch the show performances. Bojack reveals that he's actually had this dream before, and never gets to see the show as this is the moment he usually wakes up. Only this time, however, he doesn't wake up. Now, for those of you that follow the series as close as I do, may have picked up on that there were a few meta-commentary moments in the previous seasons that pointed towards Bojack actually dying at the end of the show. And some of those meta-commentary moments were even present in this season.
Very casual, so maybe she should also be casual when she says she's going to kill herself. Like, it's a big deal, but it's not a big deal for her. Like, that's the irony of the scene.
He can play all the roles that other young impressionable actors can't because they keep ODing or going to prison or going to rehab or killing themselves.
So at this point, I'm starting to think, oh shit, are they actually going to do this? So Bojack goes along to watch the show, where every character performs on stage one by one, in what actually offers some interesting animation and some nice throwback moments, such as Bojack's mother doing the dance that he mentions in the episode Free Churro, along with Crackerjack playing the iconic song from the episode The Old Sugarman Plays.
I will always think of you.
Drink a brew while see your face.
These performances have a chill to them, as at the end, all the characters jump into this black void, which seems to go nowhere. The black void obviously representing death. And this all peaks by the poem read out by Secretariat. Honestly, I think this poem is one of the most powerful suicide prevention pieces that I've ever heard. And I'm going to try and put the words on screen if I can. The words really do cut deep, and the delivery as Secretariat becomes more panicky and regretful as the piece goes on. A stark contrast to his approach on the matter at the start of dinner is truly heartbreaking. This poem is clearly inspired from the interviews given by Kevin Hines and Ken Baldwin, two survivors who attempted suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. When I jumped, I realised that all my problems could be solved, except the problem that I had just jumped.
But you can't outrun the truth.
At this point in the episode, it's been revealed that Bojack potentially attempted suicide by jumping into his old swimming pool, and the black oil we see creeping in around him is the essence of death, as his life begins to drain away. The episode really pulls no punches when dealing with the concept of death, stating that there's no afterlife, only darkness.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
The episode ends with Bojack finally accepting his fate as he has one last phone call with Diane. The episode ends as we hear a heart monitor flatline, indicating that Bojack has now passed away. Then episode 16 happens. And I think this is where my opinion is going to cause some controversy. But let's talk about the synopsis first. So, Bojack isn't dead and wakes up in hospital. Turns out the new owners of Bojack's old house returned home and managed to save him before it was too late. Bojack, as a consequence of breaking and entering, has been sentenced to prison for 1.5 years, where inside, he appears to be doing pretty well. A year has passed, and Bojack gets a day out of prison so that he can attend the wedding of Princess Carolyn and Judah. There at the wedding, Bojack manages to get some final interaction with his 3 closest friends: Todd, Princess Carolyn, and finally, Diane. Oh, and Bojack actually tastes some honeydew melon, and finds that it's actually not that bad, which is actually quite a nice end to a running gag throughout the series.
She loses all perspective.
God damn it, Honeydew! Jesus, why does Cantaloupe think every time it gets invited to a party, it can bring along its dumb friend Honeydew?
The final scene has Diane and Bojack sat together on top of the roof, similar to the scene we saw at the end of season 1. They make a joke about how this could be their last conversation together, an obvious meta joke about how this is the last episode of the show, and we get left with the two sat in silence as the song Mr. Blue plays before the credits roll. Now, I mentioned earlier that my opinions on this episode may lead to some controversy, and that opinion is that I actually found this episode to be kind of underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, the final episode of this show isn't bad by any means, and does offer some nice closure between our cast of characters, showing us how much they've moved on, particularly in such the conversation between Diane and Bojack at the end, where Diane states that she's glad she's no longer the person she used to be, but is still glad those events happen, despite how bad some of them were, including the ones with Bojack. I've been trying to think about why I didn't feel too much for this final episode. I think part of that comes down to that there was still some stories that felt unfinished. Bojack still seems to be keen to get back into the spotlight of fame.
Maybe I could direct something.
I'm sorry I said anything.
Well, I mean, hold on. Yeah, I shouldn't just jump into something, but if there's a good opportunity...
His bad Unicorn TV show is actually doing pretty well, which makes me think that he's going to fall back into the same old behavioural patterns as before, and that he's not really come full circle or learnt a true lesson. And the fact that he and Hollyhock left their friendship on such a bitter note, despite all they've been through together, is actually pretty sad. But I think my biggest issue with the final episode is that it completely diminishes the events that happened in the previous episode. Think about it. Episode 15 was a fantastic and powerful episode. But if you were to remove it from this season, what would change plot-wise? The answer? Nothing really. Episode 14 would end with Bojack breaking into his old home to watch horsing around, and the final episode would start off with him waking up in hospital and getting arrested for breaking an entry. And the episode could just flow on as usual after that. Like, if you're gonna have a moment where Bojack has actually gone to commit suicide, you've got to follow through on that and let it matter. Here's my two alternatives for how the final episode should have played out. 1. Bojack is actually dead. All the meta commentaries were correct, and the show did in fact kill off Bojack Horseman. The episode is focused around Bojack's funeral, where all the characters reminisce about their experiences and thoughts about their former friend, with the great twist at the end being with Hollyhock, as she reads the letter she wrote to Bojack. In this version of events, Bojack never mustered up the courage to read Hollyhock's letter, and when she finally does read it to the audience, it's revealed that despite her being angry with him, she still admits to overall loving him, but needs space apart and wishes him the best for the future. And you may be thinking, well, this is Steve, who's always reviewing dark and disturbing stuff. Of course he would want an utterly depressing ending. But honestly, I think it would be the harder hitting message, and as Bojack even stated previously,
never get a happy ending, because there's always more show. I guess until there isn't.
Well, in this case, they didn't, and therefore, no more show. I would even go as far to say that you didn't need an episode after episode 15. You could just have Bojack die, and that be the end of the show. As Herb states, once you die, it's nothing but blackness.
See you on the other side.
Oh, Bojack, no. There is no other side. This is it.
Like, imagine how jaw-dropped you would have been if that was the final moments of the show, and how much of an emotional impact that would have left you, and the different perspective it would give you rewatching the series, knowing how it all tragically ends. Okay, bit too depressing? Well, here's my second option. So like in the final episode, Bojack is actually revealed to be alive, but like the survivors of those who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, this experience has truly had a life-changing impact on Bojack. He now realises just how valued life is, and how trivial all his stress and worries in the past have been. And so, as a result, he decides to leave the fame and media world behind and retreat off somewhere into the wilderness, where he settles down for a quiet life. A similar ending as to how he envisioned his peaceful life with Charlotte, and a callback to the episode where they meet the former producer Cuddly Whiskers and he offers Bojack this advice.
Only after you give up everything can you begin to find a way to be happy.
Not to mention, it seemed to be kind of the way he was going at the end of season 3 before getting interrupted by Diane's phone call. But overall, still a fantastic finale to an incredible show. And at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. I'm honestly curious to hear what your opinions were on the season finale. Did you actually really like it? Am I the one that's in the wrong? Or did you have a better vision of how things could have ended? Let me know in the comment section below, and until the next one, take care.